For those of you who felt the floor shake a little bit, that was my grandfather turning over in his grave. Thank you, June and Don. It really is more than a pleasure. It's a terrific honor to be here with you today and to receive this wonderful award. I'm going to be very brief, but I can't help but tell you a story as I look out on this space that really is relevant to the very early years of HIV and what we all went through and why the Whitman-Walker Clinic from the very first day was so important in how we respond to the HIV/AIDS crisis that we were going through. Right here, where I'm standing, right on this strip here, was a lot before they built this. And in 1987, the International AIDS meeting was held here in Washington, D.C., and it was the next to last year of the Reagan administration, and he had just begun to talk a little bit about HIV/AIDS, much at my insistence and the insistence of a number of other people who had access to him. And I can remember right across the lane there at the Sequoia, everyone was in town for the International AIDS meeting. I was sitting down with my dear friend and one-time nemesis, Larry Kramer. And he was shaking me saying, I want you to chain yourself to the White House gate and tell him what to do the right thing. And I remember saying, Larry, I love you dearly, but if I chain myself to the White House gate, that's the closest I'll ever get to the White House again. So I better not do that. But anyway, it was really very historic because, as you know, in 1990 was the last International AIDS meeting that we had here in the United States. And I look around the room, and I was speaking up on the terrace with a number of people who were probably too young to know what was going on then, but it was a very embarrassing situation for us here in the United States when, because of the ban on people entering the country with HIV, the International AIDS Society refused to ever again have an International AIDS meeting here in the United States, and it went from San Francisco. The next year we used to alternate back and forth between Europe and the United States. So it was San Francisco, Florence, and then the next year was supposed to come back and be in Boston, and it wasn't. It was switched to Amsterdam, and since then we haven't had it. And I'm very pleased that you all know this already, that we have now lifted that ban, and the 2012 meeting will again be here in the United States. So it's really very, very interesting that I'm standing now on the spot when all of this was churning up. And I remember President Reagan gave a speech in a tent, literally where we're all speaking. And the only reason he did it is that Elizabeth Taylor convinced him to do it. And it was the truth. She did. And I, pre-briefed him about some of the things that he might want to say, knowing that as soon as he stepped up there, all the activists would be just making a lot of noise. And actually, they did, and they were interrupting him as he was speaking. And Elizabeth Taylor, who was very much in our corner, just went ballistic and started yelling at the crowd to just shut up and let the president speak. She put on her Maggie the Cat from Cat in the Hut Tin Roof thing, and she was yelling at Paul Newman. But it was really quite a scene. In any event, I want to thank you all very much. The Whitman-Walker Clinic has always meant an extraordinary amount to me because we were doing things at the same time. The Whitman-Walker Clinic, as many of you know, was a STD clinic back in the 70s that just jumped on it as soon as HIV became clear that we were dealing with a crisis. In 1981, when it was first recognized that we had a new disease, I completely turned around the direction of my career. I was doing something else with inflammatory diseases. In fact, some of my patients are still in the room here, so we were pretty successful. And then I devoted it to HIV. So we've been involved in the lofty activities of research and drug development and translation from basic concepts. But I always felt deep in my heart, and the reason why I still take care of HIV-infected individuals, that the real action occurs in the trenches. And the trenches in Washington, D.C. at the time was the Whitman-Walker Clinic, still is, and has always been the model prototype of how you should respond to a crisis like this. So it's really with great respect and honor that I accept this award. Thank you very much.